Hello, everybody, again. In this session, we have fellows from Teesside University, Tonguç Sezen and Didem Sezen. They will be talking about games, books, comic books, and many other issues and complicated ways of strategy development. So now I would like to invite them to our session. Hello, welcome. Hello, thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. So when you're ready, you can start by sharing your screen. I hope you can see it. Yes, we can. Great. Didem, would you like to start? Yes, of course. Hello, everybody. My name is Didem Sezen. Thank you again very much for this introduction. At Teesside University at the Department of Transmedia, Digital Arts and Animation, I work as a fellow with my colleague Tonguç. Our main working field is transmedia and games and also interactive narratives and comparative media studies, generally speaking. Before Teesside University, I was working at Istanbul University and obtained my degree, my title as an associate professor. And then after that, at a German university, I worked as a researcher. And then in the UK, I started working at Teesside University. And I'm also closely working with Bahçeşehir University from Turkey. I also am a lecturer there, and I continue with my cooperation in the field of research and education. And the floor is yours, Tonguç. Yes, my career is also similar to Didem's. I started my career, my studies at Istanbul University, and I was a part of Bilgi University's digital arts department. I was the chairperson of the department. And then in Germany, within the framework of an innovation program, I had a chance to work, and now I work at Teesside University. So to continue with where you left off, Dida, our department is the Department of Transmedia, Digital Arts and Animation. We have animation and game design, animation and design arts, and other than some programs, some software programs about games, we also have film studies and also other media studies, which include comic books. So the interrelation of those and also students transit between those areas are related with the field of education opportunities we have. And in today's presentation, we will be sharing our experiences, our observations. A part of it is theoretical, part of it is about the recent developments in media studies. So maybe we can start from here, and I'll leave you the floor, Didem, so we can talk about the overview of our presentation now. Okay, let's start with the first presentation. We will be talking about transmedia storytelling because even though this is a commonly used term in the industry and also in research, still there are some new aspects related to it as regards what it means, um, media and transmedia. We would like to start with a definition of that. Transmedia is not only related with media or gaming industry, it's related overall with the media industry because the media culture we live in is about a culture of unity, and it means that we can play, we can read, we can listen uh, via the devices we use. So that's why transmedia has a special meaning for the gaming industry, but its scope is larger. It's also related with the challenges, the difficulties of using it in the gaming industry, and of course, there are some opportunities. While talking about the opportunities, before we talked to ourselves, Tonguç and I, that we should address it within the framework of maybe a conceptual academic framework. Uh, Renia Gambarto is a scholar in transmedia and has a perspective for transmedia analysis and a design framework. And in my lectures, when it comes to transmedia subjects, I use this framework to analyze. So it's Janus faced, if you will. It's like you need a recipe when you cook a cake, but on the other hand, it helps you understand and analyze, decode what you are dealt with to see all of its opportunities, disadvantages, and advantages. It's a way of mapping, if you will. So we will go over those discussions. Would you like to add something to that, Tonguç? No, I guess we can continue with the next slide. So, as every academic have to give you a definition, even though the concept is Jenkins coined a term in 2006 and gave it a definition. Well, Henry Jenkins, in the beginning of 2000, looked into some media brands that came to the attention after Matrix movie, particularly. Talks about an integrated way of storytelling. And then, many times, Jenkins revised this definition. The team or the creative team were involved, but slowly media brands have adopted an evolutionary expansion model. But transmedia storytelling, generally speaking, represents multiple media channels and a unit. Yes, there are new rules and concepts. We're talking about creating new worlds with peculiar rules or concepts. And when you create a new world, just imagine you are in a new world, and for that reason, you will, of course, have many questions coming your way. As you try to answer those questions using different channels or multiple delivery channels, you then end up in transmedia. When you transit or transmit over different channels, you need a story. And that's why transmedia storytelling strategies are related with this communication or relation in between the consumers and the producers. It tries to make this communication more smooth. So I can talk about a few challenges of transmedial approaches, as this is specifically related to gaming. When we talk about video games, maybe we have a bitter taste in our mouth when we hear that. Maybe the adaptation of games to movies. This is not completely wrong because in the academic literature, especially in the beginning of 2005, uh, there's a book published said that many chefs, many cookers try to cook in this same kitchen. This is indeed a good allegory. And when it comes to industry, related work, we see that many different production cultures have to cooperate, and sometimes there are challenges. Maybe a film is produced in a year, you write the screenplay and direct it and so on, but when it comes to good quality game, you need a longer time. And this article talks about industry standards and some other issues, and talks about also how this process can prolong. That's why, depending on the calendar you have for a film, let's say, and if you want to develop a game related with that, then the game developers, if they are to sign a contract, it means that you already spent a half of the time to be allocated for the developers, and that's why it's not always possible for them to develop within that period, and that's why there are some hybrid products that come our way, and it may lead to some quality challenges. So when talking about transmedia and game industry, these are some of the challenges related with different production cultures. Related with that, we also have to accept the fact that it's an exploitative sector. There is a brand, a media brand, and if you share it over different channels, consumers are expected to buy it and pay for it. So this is a very clear commercial target, putting creativity aside. Of course, it's a creative part of it cannot be ignored, but there is the commercial part of it. And as a continuation of challenges related with the production chain, you try to make profits in a very short period of time, or try to meet the needs of a brand frequently. And sometimes there are mismatches that unintentionally appear. And to exploit this brand, I mean, in a good sense, trying to make profit out of it, you end up with some challenges coming your way, and sometimes it leads to franchise fatigue, and you have to put it up to the shelf sometimes. So some challenges as such, and sometimes you see projects that are a little too ambitious or a little too much. For example, Rockland Ship was a big project, and they couldn't with the process, and Fox said no to it, and that ambitious project uh, was left halfway in the middle, unfinished. And sometimes you have maybe very small scale projects, and those may help the company profit in a very short period of time. It's ever changing and is always finding in technology, in media, or um, uh, primarily or previously tried opinions are to face evolution and ever growing change, and you have to think thoroughly how you can adapt to those changes. And companies, producers, or consumers cannot, of course, always adapt so easily. Maybe Dam, you can continue, maybe offering how Raniero Gambarato approaches to that. Yes, transmedia is interesting. In my background, film studies, I can say that you generally come up with an idea, try to write a screenplay, and think about the film only. But when it comes to transmedia, you talk about a much more complex phenomena. It deals with toys, games, cinema, films, or TV series, books. With all the merchandise, it's a much more hyperbolic structure. Um, it goes the same for a book. It's maybe related with the outline of the book only, but when it comes to transmedia, you have to look into it from a hyperbolic perspective, which is based on multi perspectives. That's why you need a different conceptual framework, and we will use Raniero Gambarato's framework in this regard and try asking some questions as regards that. The first question is about the project. The first phase of a project, complex or simple, is the goal. So this should be the first question to be asked, the purpose of the question. Where does this stand? Are we trying to develop a game or try to develop a game that is a part of a bigger franchise? Where is it positioned? Is it a corporate game or is it a documentary project or is it both documentary related or fictional in its characteristics? So that's why you have to answer those questions to be able to design the general framework of it and make decisions how we will market it. And Gambarato's questions about transmedia are exemplified. We try to exemplify it through some examples from the gaming industry. So, from a transmedia perspective, your project has some questions related with its, of course, identity. But if you have a transmedial target, then does this brand stand at the core of this product? Because if you are placed at the core, then your power or your guidance towards the targets differ because it's you who give guidance or direction, and your followers expect what will come out in the next game. So, to be able to understand that and have the responsibility as regards demands having teamwork and teammates who will understand and join you on the path leading to it. If a project is launched, for that project to generate money, you might also have some auxiliary, some additional products. For example, how many of you do remember Disney's Treasure Planet? Or how many of you remember the game itself? But this project had a target and its era. Yes, it has to have a certain level of quality so it grows popular and those interested would buy it and not swear at you that much frequently, just like what happened to a ET game, at least in the media history, so that your game is not thrown to trash. So, but if you are developing your games for Star Wars, a big brand, just like Racer, you can see that it can be recirculated, it can be brought to your way anytime, and that's why you have to test the power of the brand well. Or sometimes your brand or your game can open some space for a film. Batman Arkman's Night series or Lego Batman series. These are different brands, it's normal for a Batman comic book reader to play it, but on the other hand, you can access an address to a target audience that is interested in both the comic books and the game, and you have to acknowledge the potential. And is it a crossover? A Star Wars package maybe for Minecraft, or maybe another package for Sims 4. You already have your mechanics, so you can integrate the values of the brand into the mechanics of the game. And while doing that, you might think about the Minecraft as of its own universe, but also have some additional tier park, maybe market value that you will add to it. So this is what transmedia offers us as opportunities. Another question is about the narrative. So narrative is a very key issue for game studies, and sometimes you feel overwhelmed, especially the first graders, the freshman students especially, sometimes get engaged in this discussion. Is it that simple or not? And it leads to something larger in its sense. So, uh, is there a narrative in all games? In a Tetris-like game, yes, we're not talking about that, but we experience the stories available in the games. We decide for the characters, and we follow a certain dramatic line, and then we, within the scale of the scope of the game, have an interactive experience. That's why narrative is very crucial for games. But you might say there are many games in which there's no narrative. And relating it to transmedia, I can say the fact that if the whether the game has a narrative or not does not mean it won't be transmedial. So maybe Angry Birds is a good example for that. Think about the story of Angry Birds. We do not concentrate on its story when we first play it. There are some birds which do not have wings or can't fly. So very nice. They're pigs, they're stealing their eggs, and this is what the story is. But there is a great transmedia experience. There's this game, and there are some films produced from it, and also comic books, film parks in different places of the world, and there is a transmedial story. So, uh, this is a transmedial brand as well.
Well, yes, that's true. Design is actually a factor of a transmedia, and it is a great example for that. Another thing is about world building in transmedial stories. If I'm going back to the previous instance, well, it is actually an expression of Harry Jenkins, but for a good scenario, you need to first create a good character. This is what it is said in movie filmmaking schools. So what we say is that for a great transmedial story, you need to create a great world first, because a script of a movie requires a story. However, a transmedial world, while it also can generate new stories, and all these stories would make the main story grow, and it would bring you new perspectives and some extra stories. So it's really important to build this world in transmedial work. When we think from this perspective, well, it is actually a field that you dominate better than me. Your game, if it is an external edition of a certain brand, what is expected is actually walking around in this world. Like, for example, walking around the streets of Hogwarts. So this is a new interactive experience, and it is the simulation of what we see on the screen, and it is actually being translated on real time, and it is really difficult, and I think that it will bring a great success. Henry Jenkinson also defines by saying that every media, every platform actually tells the story the best way that it could. Well, in the novels of the Hemingway, yes, you read the novel and then you meet with the characters and it's a totally new world and you just think about the world totally different. And children, they generally go into the story via the toys. And you have the experience of actually feeling the world. It is an interactive experience. So I think that games genuinely contribute into it. It's not an example of games, but if you know this image, if you know this visual, this is not an example of the design. Empire Strikes Back movie. Mr. McQuarrie actually made this drawing. It was found on the archives and it made the brand of Star Wars actually valuable again. So when we say world building, when it comes to the big brands, we also mean and talk about actually big world. Our students, when they start studying in our program, generally they ask the question, movie, game, cartoons, these are different concepts. And would we have the opportunity of working together with all these different areas? Well, our response is quite positive because they can find actually different platforms when they graduate. Another example, last month, there was a presentation of Indieway. I remember, let alone the games. I think it is science. This is talking about the world of tool and producer team internalize the world. And this is a transmedial spirit, I believe, about the producers, because they are using this promotional material and the team interprets the world on their own. So this is actually a side product of this whole game developing world. But as an academic myself, if you ask me, I would say that this gives us a great hint about the definition of this world building. Another title we can talk about is characters, because we're talking about a world. There are spaces within, there are stories and events, incidents going on. And of course, there are certain characters. So discovery of the characters, I believe that it is really important for transmedia because there are main actors and there are side characters, right? And sometimes actually secondary characters are loved more than the primary characters, and there can be some spin-offs, and then we focus on the spin-offs protagonists. And I think that it is really important in general. So even the world's inner actually world can be observed and seen in here. The design actually method is important. Export serial for many years. Yes, we have controlled our own soldiers, but because of the design of the game, these characters are without names, and you can waste them, you can sacrifice them. These are unnamed soldiers. The recent published Chimera Squad game also gives you a team and you manage the team yourself. And I think that this changes transmedia and many things. A Chimera Squad, well, does it use it frequently? No, not really. However, when we look at the fan art about the Chimera Squad, all these characters actually, all these characters are used in many cartoons by fans as they are presented in the game. So it is actually a different area of interest. A very simple design preference of yours might create a different perception among the fans, and we have to be aware of this fact. I think that another great example is Overwatch. This proves and shows the importance of the character. Here, while you would see a long paragraph, you can maybe read it afterwards, but in 2018, a presentation was made and it talks about a hero. The idea, when the idea first emerged, there were only 5 people, and this team first focused on the playing and as well did the testing. And in the end, this 150 people worked only for one hero, one character. Well, it is a really a big number actually. But for smaller teams also gives us an idea. Well, if you would like to do a transmedial work, this is really important. Another issue is extensions. Yes, we have a main narrative. It might be a novel or a movie or a game. And then you see the extensions, adaptations. Well, from the perspective of fans, it might create a lot of conflicts because they might dislike it. They may not like the adaptations. Well, they might think that it is quite a conflictful somehow with the original versions, or they might be happy as well. So when it comes to the extensions, well, I think that it is important part of the transmedial narrations, and it brings some certain problems. When we think of the narrative extensions, where to adopt, where to focus on, these are, I believe, important questions. What do you think? Yes, when we think of it, are we talking about the stories that are realized within the same world, or is it the untold side of the story? It's really important to arrange it because it shows us the profitability of the transmedia. First-person shooter and as well the third person and shooter adventure. It gives you the experience of being a Jedi, and Star Wars actually gives us such an experience. Here you can see the 3 versions such as Jedi Knight and Star Wars Force and Jedi Fallen Order. Well, these are principally are the same. They are using a sword, and they actually experience this world by using the beam sword. Well, there are different characters. I don't remember their names all, but these are the characters. They go through a very similar journey, and they kill the soldiers. So it is a very similar experience what we see in the movies. So in the extension adaptations, we can see such examples because when the brand gets older, well, you get maybe younger. Let's not forget one thing. When we say extension, it's not actually an extraordinary thing for us. On the screen, you would see a package. DLCs are being produced regularly. Well, are extensions a must in the age of the DLC? I think that it would mean that not using your potential, because some fans during the production process, they might pay you to purchase some concepts, and some other fans might purchase the music album of the game. So that's why extensions can be really different and diverse, and as well there's a high potential of making profit out of it. We are not talking about big investments. Downloadable content is the age that we are living in. Another important thing is media platforms. Today, well, by the way, of course, I'm talking about general platforms, but we are not even playing the games in the same platform. We are using our mobile devices or PC. Well, gamers profile. Well, we used to have a profile, defined profile for the gamers, but now it's no longer the case. Because games are an important part of our daily lives, and the gamers' definitions and perception have changed. So it's really important to look at all these media platforms, I believe, from a different perspective, because sometimes you can access to a mother with a kid, or sometimes you can access to a young person or a senior person, depending on the device that they are using. Yes, technology is evolving. Well, we can talk about the technology afterwards, but a transmedia strategy is one of the most important feature is that it enables you to the switch in between the platforms. It enables it. Well, I think what we see is quite interesting because transmedia, well, we used to go to the movie, and when we just walked out of the hall, it was over. Or when you turn off your TV, for example, it is no longer in your life, but we carry our mobile devices with us. It means that this games can continue during the day. So it is maybe predictable to see the usage of the mobile devices among the users, and we can understand their usage habits, because this is actually the journey of a user. How come they switch from one platform to the other platform? So I believe that when you think of different transmedial structures, the journey of a user is exactly like the hero's journey. You need to maybe predict it beforehand. Well, as far as I remember, this is a transmedia project that is focusing on TV. It is a map. Well, let me make you another warning. Enabling I believe, switches in between the cultures is really important. It's like the transition between the maybe worlds and the platforms. For example, Pokemon. There are hundreds of platforms that you can play Pokemon. They are analog or digital, but there are same core mechanics. There are same main characters, but the platforms are different. And of course, as a result of the design, the games and the episodes of the games are different. So they're not the same exactly, but they all play Pokemon, and they all play the same character. So I think it also shows that consistency is really important when we think of the transmission and switch in between the platforms. Sometimes we see such a platform that you maybe see an impossible possibility. Well, I really like the intersection of his story. Here you would see the example of Star Trek. Well, they built the Star Bridge within their house, and they have fun the characters of the Star Trek. So just think of normal people sitting in their living room, and they just live such an experience, and it's a great actual platform. And of course, it is quite possible to eliminate all other challenges, because you just sit in your living room and you're having an adventure in between the galaxies, and fans really do love it. So I think that overlapping is quite essential in that regard. When we say audience and market, well, these are very interrelated, and actually they share some common points. Let's continue with an example because we're about to do our time. Well, we should remember Dungeons and Dragons is really important for understanding the market and as well investigating. If you are to read the story in 80s, you would see that that was a market leader and a giant, Dungeons and Dragons, back then in the 80s. And they even dominated the cartoons and it dominated the market for a long time. And because of the company problems, yes, they failed for a while, but I think that that was a great example. So another example is a Dutch researcher, Das Lewitt. Well, this person researched about the relationship in between the games and religions. And Assassin's Creed's thrill was actually his topic, and he had the opportunity of analyzing in at his own studios. And I was so impressed actually because the next game of the Assassins is decided by the marketing department, not by the developers. Because the marketing department decides on what comes next, the next world, and the new things that might happen in the game, all are decided by the marketing team in Assassin's Creed game. So you're not the only one as the developer who would decide the future of the game. Well, there are a lot of other stakeholders who might be part of it. Engagement also is very essential. The engagement with audience, players, developers. So it's not like creating a media content and offer it to the people, but it is somehow is that you create something and you grow it together with the audience. Last of Us Part 2, it is scores, user score and meta score. If we are to compare these two scores, we would understand that fan engagement is very important. This is what we understand. We really need to think about the fans, and we really need to think about to manage their expectations and offer maybe something new to them. You don't need to satisfy their expectations all the time, but at least you can offer something new to them. So you need to maybe clear a space for them. There is no other way. Just think of the review or the modding community or fan fiction. This is the media ecology that we have, and we cannot actually go forward without audience. This is how we manage our brand. Last two titles. Structure is as well very important. We talk about transmedia projects. However, generally we start to work with an idea without big strategies. We generally go after a great idea. So that's why each transmedia project does not start with such as a transmedia project. Is that right? Well, maybe we can ask two questions. Well, if your project failed, then what would you do? Aliens, colonial, marines. It was not that successful, but well, the brand was really strong, and the last two games were really good. But the company invested in a lot actually for the aliens, colonial, marines, and they have a great content, books, novels, and while it is maybe distribution was impacted by the failure of Alliance Colonial Marines, because they even have books, and this book this book was published actually right after the elimination of the game characters, because people did not really like the game that much. So all the related materials such as books were edited and revised, and such failures actually impact companies, but companies somehow continue by eliminating such factors. So if you do not fail, then what to do? If you do not fail, this is a mothership that was produced in the Minecraft. And Jim Hinkson focuses on the mothership model. And it means that you have a brand, it grows, and it becomes a mothership. And then you actually somehow enlarge it. So it's just like that you have a good potential. So this is what we did for the Minecraft. And finally, it is aesthetics. We know that each project has its own aesthetics, and maybe Minecraft is an interesting actually example for that. I think that is quite important, that sustainability is very important for the transmedia franchisers. Yes, that's true. Here you'll see two cartoons. The one on the right is from Call of Duty cartoon, and the one from the left, Metajuice series. Both of them have certain differences of drawing, so their aesthetics are different. And it is all about the positioning of these two brands. Well, of course, franchise is important for the one on the left, but Call of Duty, well, is a more like mainstream brand. So of course it is qualified, but in comparison to the other one, in terms of representation, it looks quite regular and ordinary. So you can see it as well on the extensions of this brand. So maybe I can conclude by saying a few things. What do you say? Transmedia storytelling, of course, holds great artistic and commercial potential for game development. And we are, as users, of course, go with the flow. And maybe we need a strategy, because there are a lot of diverse things, contents. So if you grasp audience, you cannot let them go for your brand. So users, the more they invest on the brand, the more they watch the movie or play the game or read the books, of course, and the more time they invest in, and the more money they invest in, then they keep staying. And this relationship shouldn't be boring. And I think that producers have a lot of things to do. And of course, commercial opportunities are quite obvious, but on the other hand, it's quite challenging. Is that right? Because quality attraction, well, you need to keep it fresh, and you need to produce such content that you would keep satisfying users. Let's not forget, transmedia storytelling is not a success formula. So there's not anything such as that you do it and you will be very, very successful. Well, we are working entire industries, and this transmission is very difficult, and it requires a lot of experience, to be honest. Well, I guess we have no time for questions. Unfortunately, we are over time. I'd like to thank you individually to both of you. Thank you very much for this beautiful presentation. We would like to see you in the coming events. Thank you. Thank you.